Greetings and welcome back to Stacking Stupid. I'm your host, Brian Anderson. Today's episode is actually going to be sponsored and brought to you by Elm City CrossFit. They're a good college roommate of mine, owns a little gym, so sadly it is local, but they do programming and all sorts of that kind of stuff. So you can look them up at Elm City CrossFit. All right, moving on. Today's I want to talk about concepts and specifically the concept of money. A lot of people are because it's so commonly used and commonplace that we think as money as an actual thing. And it does represent actual things, okay? But the whole thing is a construct of human design and creativity, okay? So humanity came up with an idea of money to simplify and allow trade and barter. Okay, so it's completely a construct of human beings. Completely a construct of human beings. Okay, so now let's go back in time. Say, I don't know, I'm just going to throw out a number, 10,000 BC. So before, the onset of modern civilizations, and we're just a nomadic tribe. If you think about how we currently assess value and money and all this stuff, there's this idea that like people earned it. And don't be wrong, there's plenty of people that did actual work and earned things. But so back 10,000 years, my tribe, we're going through the forest and we're like, hey, this place looks like a great place to set up shop and have a little village and stuff. So we start doing that. And we just took the land. We just took it. It's just ours now, okay? It's really important to understand, because in our current society, if you owned land, like if I owned Pennsylvania, I'd be a billionaire, a trillionaire if I owned Pennsylvania, okay? Well, somewhere way back in history, somebody just said, I own it. It's mine now. And when people tried to argue with them, they probably killed them. They definitely out-argued them, but they probably just said, no, I don't like what you're saying. I'm going to beat you to death, throw you in the river. And then enough people stopped challenging him because they're like, the last guy who asked that question didn't come back. Let's just stop talking about that. Okay, and of course, as civilization came up and, border disputes and we've definitely gravitated towards some more civil ways to define and address some of this stuff. But at the core concept, the beginning, it was just somebody making a decision that it's mine, and then forcing that upon everybody else. And whoever had the most right had the most might in the beginning, at least. Okay? So that's really important as you look at wealthy people, wealthy families, and I'm not trying to ignore the transient wealth concepts like, there's definitely a lot of people that, not all wealth is inherited. But I think it's really important that we understand from the concept of value, wealth, and money, that these are all constructs. Even the construct of how land is owned is defined by humans in our society. And we can change those definitions, and those definitions have been changed to help, throughout time, to help keep power where it is, and those changes were promoted by the people in power. So as we get closer and closer to an enlightened society and we think about things that aren't working and things that are, it helps if historically we understand that they actually had no right to some of, the origin of that land or wealth, because land is just, I'm using it almost as a placeholder to say, well, if you owned a lot of things, well, then you have a lot of wealth or had a lot of wealth. So the same thing is true now. And understand that also over time the people in power corrupted and twisted some of those rules so that they got more power and wealth. Okay, and all that should make understand. Hopefully, there's no arguments there. Well, why is it so important? Well, if we look at the wealth gap and how it continues to accelerate and how big it is, and then you go, well, wait a minute, maybe what we should talk about is the origins of wealth. And you realize that it's legitimately just subjective, that a lot of it is just people saying, oh, I own this, or this is mine. Ripping people off, businesses ripping people off, and Um, like I said, way back, you're just saying this land is mine, or this boundary is mine, or this country is mine. Wow, okay, so that's not really a good equal opportunity foundation to define wealth. So maybe that should be part of the discussion if we're looking for a better way to do it. And if we're trying to argue that the way we have been doing it is the best, seems a little bit weird. It's a little controversial, but maybe a great example of that is the concept of having slaves and slavery. Now, the story of slavery worldwide is a little bit different than here in just the United States. Cultures have been oppressing other cultures to do free work since the beginning of civilized time. Okay? So that's not, really, I'm just oppressing you because I don't want to do the work myself. If I can get you to do it for no money, just a little bit of food, I'm rich. Okay. Well, whether it's the Egyptian cultures, Babylonians, Mesopotamia, like all these cultures had some version of slavery. Some were a little bit more civilized than others. I'll skip the history component because I'm really just talking about that wealth and monetary value. So now, let's bring it back to the money. And I'm not talking about literally the concept of the dollar. I'm talking about what money stands for, which effectively is power. The correlation of power and money have gotten extremely close in the last 20 years. And you might even make an argument that they're almost inseparable. So as we discuss concepts and things that might be a better way forward, I think it's really important to understand that it is not a direct correlation between your current wealth and your current value of what you contribute to our current society. A lot of current wealth is established through exploits, creating monopolies, whether it be through legal loopholes. Another common, a legal loophole might be like buying up rights. And then Disney is a good example where they just change copyright protections. So how come nobody else can use Mickey Mouse ever? Because Disney just bought the vote. And I personally think it's wrong. It's not in support of free market because of it stifles competition. But I think it's way more important that we just discuss it. Maybe not that I get my way and that I'm absolutely right. But that we discuss it, because if it's not being discussed and we're trying to envision a new way forward, how can you skip that part of the conversation? But you also see this with market domination, whether it be like selective marketing, where like I'll sell here, you sell here, I'll sell here, you sell here, I'll sell here, you sell here. In politics, you see this concept in like gerrymandering. Same concepts like, well, I'm just going to rig the vote so that I don't have competition. Okay? So all that is bad. All that is not good for promotion of free market capitalism. So if the core argument behind the capitalist economic system is that the free markets govern the pressures is what governs itself, and under that in a completely altruistic sense, the less guidance you have, the better the free market will correct for true supply and demand. Okay, well then you got to realize that that's not what we're having, and that's not what we have. Because if people in power, well, what the first thing they would do is mess with those cause and effect equations, and that's what they did. Okay, so money and ownership is, from my point of view, it's all just somebody with a big stick a long time ago said, this is mine. And they're still doing it today. They just have better smoke and mirrors. And if we try and envision a better answer going forward, it needs to take that into account. It needs to be way more broad vision than just something like, big topic right this second is the reparations for, slavery here in the United States. Well, let's be honest, slavery is not just a United States topic, and it's not just an African American topic. Like I said, slavery has existed since the beginning of civilized, humanity. Like, absolutely. Just one culture oppressing another culture. It goes across races. Okay. Um, so how do you have a discussion about wealth and where to go heading forward without acknowledging the simplicity of some of these wealth concepts? The origins of them are not equal, are not fair, and we're not in the best interest of all parties. Because I think that's a really important thing, is that you should have a system that is working for the majority of the people in that system, not an elite minority. And the system has to fight that, because if you're leader, if you think of this conceptually, leaders will or should be in the minority, because if not, they wouldn't be leaders. So they get to a position where they are considered, part of that minority, and then of course by default they will take the power, whether it be through wealth, money, or just other factors, influence. They will then modify the system to keep themselves in power, and of course acquire more wealth. And it's exactly what you're seeing and have seen over the last, realistically mid 70s, but I'll just talk. The closer we get to modern times, the more it resonates with us, people who have lived through it. So with that in mind, we need to try and build checks and balances within the system to check to see if decisions are being made that support the aggregate whole and majority populace, or if it's just basically small corruption, which of course over time is going to become a dysfunctional system. All right, so that's kind of my talk on money and wealth, and the facts that if you really think of the origin of it, the first person, William Penn, who I live in Pennsylvania, and they said, hey, however far you can get, with your horses, and he rigged the system, and that's why Pennsylvania is so big. That's whatever. I'm not saying it happened, but it definitely wasn't earned through some innovated wealth and miraculous production. It was just a trick that took wealth and land from the Native Americans. So, all right. Once again, foundational pillar of understanding that wealth was just exploitation many, many, many thousands of years ago. And some of those core concepts have fallen with us. And as we envision a more equal and prosperous future that protects more of us, we need to criticize some of the origins of these ideas. And we can't just be brainwashed into they earned it. And some of them did, absolutely. Or even, an argument might be made. You may have, definitely portions of the work definitely add value to us as a whole society and the global civilization. But we also need to understand the anchor points and the origin points were not fair, were not equal. They had not even close, not even close. So to try and say, well, you were rich yesterday, so that doesn't mean you earned it, and it doesn't, the default should not be that. And I think a better way to frame it is whatever we create going forward, we can do better than what we've done in the past, because I beat up my neighbors and took their land, and because of that I'm wealthy. Well, we already see that's not kind of allowed in our current society. I can't go beat up my neighbor and take his lawnmower because it's better than mine. Well, maybe I can, but I'm not supposed to. So with that in mind, shouldn't we all play by those rules? And I think we need to be really critical of how we got here and not ignore it, because there's definitely this motivation, this narrative of if people are wealthy, they earned it. And I don't think that's true in an absolute sense. I think there's probably they probably did some great, brilliant things to get where they are. And even if they did some negative and exploitive things, it's probably not an absolute. But I think we need to frame the bad things as well as the good things. And we need to resist this temptation to just think that everybody earned it. Because I'm probably not going to do a whole nother, here's a great example for me. when I think of a doctor and what a doctor gets paid, and when I think of what Alex Rodriguez got paid, like, I don't understand why this is a truth in our current society. You know, how can you pretend you're enlightened if somebody who saves actual human beings from dying, okay, gets, and the disparity is ginormous, gets paid way less than like a professional entertainer? Okay. Now, the reality is it's because there's more money in entertainment, because it applies to more people at one time, which of course allows for more things like advertising revenue. Don't care. Okay, lower your costs. Okay, stop paying doctors, you know, and people who, you know, I won't get into that's a little bit too political, but people who save lives less than people who, you know, makes a few people laugh, you know, whatever. Because that's just, you're motivating the wrong things. All right. So money, wealth, let's be super, you know, critical, and let's challenge ourselves to come up with better versions going forward always, because the history of how we got there is not so cut and dry, and it's not equal, and it's not in the preservation of the masses. Absolutely not. Okay. Thank you guys for coming to Stacking Stupid, and we'll see you next week with another video.